Okay, reconvening the City of Philomath Planning Commission meeting discussing the housing chapter of the comprehensive plan. I think that's Joseph had a proposal that we talk a little bit about what we'd like to see. And I think that's, pretty much the purpose of these, pretty much the purpose of the housing chapter is what you want to see around housing in the city of Philomath. So I think that's valuable and would certainly inform what sort of goals that we would want to include in our housing chapter. So I think it would be great to go through the commission and let each person spend a couple minutes discussing what they'd like to see. I think, how about if we go alphabetically, since Gianna was asked first, and then I'll go last. That sound like a plan to everybody? Any objections or commentary before we start? Councillor Causey.
Thank you. I just wanted to, in looking at the Monroe document, I just wanted to comment, the first goal really captures a lot of the same information that is in the Philomath document. And then as you move into some of the other goals, it gets into some things that we have never discussed in the context of the housing needs analysis. For example, community services strengthen relationships with the Monroe School District and the amenities it provides, while also continuing to seek out opportunities to provide more spaces for community members to gather. So while I agree with Gianna, I like this document because it is very aspirational, it's very broad, but to what degree can we just go out and grab something from thin air and bring it in because it's a great idea? I'm just looking for some direction from Chris, I guess, or anyone.
Well, personally, my hope is that we can have this discussion about what our goals are, and that we can look at, I like I said earlier, I was very intrigued by some of the examples because I think they might split the difference between the recommendations from Eco Northwest and Monroe. So yeah, I hear you. Chris.
Yeah, I think at the, my feeling is that at the policy level, when you're setting goals and setting policy, I think you absolutely can look at what we like from other communities and look to implement that or copy it, so to speak. I mean, a good idea in one place can easily transfer to a good idea someplace else. My only caution would be, we do want to keep an eye on our own city's goals and aspirations, right? And if somebody's written something that's in line with our goals and our aspirations, then great, we'll copy that all day long. I don't know that we'd want to do a blanket slate, copy everything, but that's not what you're recommending, right? So, if there's good ideas that come from Monroe or Sherwood or North Plains or any of the others out there, I think we should pull them in, discuss them. Again, at a policy level, at a goal setting level, we're fine. Where it's going to make the difference is when you get down to, what's the code language that we're going to implement that's going to, carry that through, or what are the action items that we're going to recommend, or that the city council is going to look at, that's going to pull it through. That's going to vary from community to community because we're different communities in different cities. At a goal level, I absolutely, again, we don't need to reinvent this. We can grab stuff we like and put it in place.
Yes, I think we're all in agreement. Just getting the work done is the hard part. So Gianna, do you want to start?
Yeah, I guess if I had to choose three factors for me that are important, having more environmentally sustainable building, The section goal 3 in the Monroe plan, I absolutely loved all of I loved that chunk right there, and I wished we had something like that. So I would say environmentally sustainable, their goal 4, density. I'm also a pro-density proponent. And lastly, I'm also interested in more mixed residential zoning. I'm not really, I don't really understand the reason for R1, R2, and R3 zoning, aside from an attempt by rich people to avoid having to live next to poor people. So I would like to see neighborhoods that are single-family homes and multifamily dwellings all together in the same neighborhood. So those are my 3 things.
Thank you. So I think that brings us to Haley, if my alphabetical.
Should I only pick 3? I mean, I feel like I could maybe talk for like an hour.
That's why I said a couple of minutes.
I would like.
I think we all could.
I like the idea of you know, green spaces, you know, environmentally sustainable. I think having parks between communities, having pathways, walk spaces, not just, I'm not a huge fan of high density. If it is, I think it needs to be in a city center. I like the idea that we have farms kind of peppered around, you know, places where there are people that have, you know, goats, and I like that it's mixed. I wouldn't mind increasing the density, but keeping it more central, you know, where those people can walk to the grocery store, or whatever it may be, as we start to increase. And then as you build out, you have, you know, maybe larger lots, farms surrounding the outside, kind of, you know, that, what is it, wedding cake tiered in a sense, without, you know, the leveling of it, but from density. I also like the idea of the economically sustainable. I really do like Monroe's. I wrote a lot of comments on here. It's very easy to read. It's very easy to follow and understand. And I kind of like the idea of, you know, innovation, thinking outside the box, not picking, you know, hey, they did this, let's copy that, having kind of our own theme, like we're starting to do with downtown, and kind of growing with that as we do building design. So I guess that's about it. We don't have all day.
Okay. Commissioner Hunsaker. You there, Van? You're on mute.
I guess the way I look at it, in some ways, it doesn't really matter what I think as far as how the community should grow. We get a lot of direction from the state. That's what the whole planning process is directed by the state. So we have some wiggle room. I don't disagree with that, but we are going, I mean, at least by what the state expects, is that we have a document that allows for growth. I mean, if I had a personal opinion that I didn't want us to grow, well, even as the planning commissioner, I don't feel that would be right for me to push that personal opinion. So in terms of specific things, however, I am in favor of growth. I should use that as an example that I wasn't, because I'm not. I know firsthand that to be sustainable as a community, we need to grow. And of course, how we do that is the important question. If we have, in terms of housing, if we meet the goals or the needs from that housing needs analysis, I think we come up with a pretty good thing. We know we need housing for lower incomes, so that would be my first goal, is to actually effectuate that, make that happen. And I think after that, it's gravy, I guess you could say. That's about it.
Okay. Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah. So I've got a short list of things here. I didn't really have this prepared, but I just kind of wrote this down, scribbled some notes as I was listening. So first off, I'd like to see a town where seeing the trees was easier than seeing anything else. Trees are a pretty cheap way to make any town look beautiful, and I'd love to see a whole lot more trees. And I really like the power lines to be underground. I have no idea what that takes, but I'm sure it's possible. I'd like it if we had a template for the town. I mean, it's kind of the zoning map, but if we had a template for the town that puts people next to services. For example, the apartment complexes that have gone in recently are kind of like islands. They're just sitting there. There's no real way to walk from there to anywhere else that you want to be, not easily. And they're not really next to anywhere that people want to walk to. So if you're in one of the apartments, you pretty much need to get in your car and drive if you want to go do anything. On 19th Street, you can walk from the apartments to the gas stations and get a snack, but not much else. And that's not necessarily anybody's fault. I'm not trying to point fingers. I'm just saying, I'd like it if in the future, when we got more apartments or whatever, if they weren't just like islands kind of plugged down somewhere, but if instead the people in there didn't have to get in their cars every time they wanted to go somewhere. I'd like a lot of walking paths. So specifically, if you're living somewhere in the town, you should be able, if you want to walk or bike almost anywhere else in the town you want to go. I'd like a way for everyone to be able to afford a house, but without urban sprawl. I don't know how exactly that would be done. Maybe it's impossible, but I would like that thing. And then lastly, but definitely not least, I would like the cars and the commerce to be away from the people in the parks. So when I look at the list of things that I really care about, most of it falls under the category of controlling not so much what goes into our town, but having a say in where things go, so that they're all arranged in a kind of a way that flows.
Okay. Commissioner Yoder.
Did we get Darlene's?
Oh, missed one. Yes. Commissioner Graves.
Yeah, I would like to see, I would really like to see housing for our various income levels, especially low income. I mean, young people, people of limited needs have a really hard time getting into a house now. I would love to see more walkability that is, provides access to services and shopping. I don't know how you go about developing a sort of a city center that is more pedestrian oriented than, when you have a state highway rolling through and trucks and whatnot. It's not a good mix, but it's what we have. I'd like to, see how to mitigate that somehow. And then we need to attract some businesses to support the residents. So if we can get the housing thing kind of sorted out so that we could bring some more resources in, I know everybody wants a grocery store in Philomath, but that doesn't really seem, to go anywhere. And like Joe, I would love to see the utilities underground. I know that's expensive, but it's a really nice look when you don't have those all over the place. A lot of what has been said before, but things that are important.
Thank you. I guess for me, definitely affordability of housing, but with quality design, what everybody else has been saying. I throw in the architecture there too. One example is townhouses, where you've just got a row of townhouses. I was recently in Salt Lake City and was on a street, and I saw a small street with a row of townhouses down it, but it wasn't straight. It was curved a little bit, and it was a fairly narrow street. So it felt like more of a European downtown, and it was density. It was walkable. It had access to the houses from the back sides, and it looked great. And I think, there's only so much that we as a city can do to encourage those sorts of things, but I think there's some things we can do to discourage the 500 unit complex all in one place with just parking lots and big buildings. So it's that design plus everything else everybody said. I do want to see growth in Philomath because I think we're a better community with a little bit more growth, maybe, that can sustain a grocery store and that can deal with all these issues. But just like anything, we can plan, and it's hard to. It's a free market economy, so it's what people decide to do with our planning that is really going to make the city. So I think these goals are important that we're talking about. To kind of help set the strategy, and I took notes on what people said, and I think we'll
Gary,
see
we're going to go back to Commissioner Yoder.
Was she not done?
What did I say, Gary?
You went to Commissioner Yoder, then you went back to Commissioner Rose, and
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry.
That's
sorry.
okay. No, I'm
done. So
I
yes.
agree with what a lot of people have said. First thing came to my mind was I would like to see our reality better reflect the designs that we get from the architects when it comes to from the couplet, which had the median lined with trees, all beautiful and green and lush. And what do we have? Large river rock. Sometimes they get painted blue. And then, from the streetscapes, what are we going to really wind up with? So that really kind of struck me. The large subdivisions, I think that it's almost imperative to do what some places are doing and demand a small convenience store within a large subdivision, so people don't always have to drive to get a gallon of milk or a carton of cigarettes or whatever it is. The walkability. As far as high density, I'm for high density within the core. The walkability, I think Haley but I also like mixed use. I don't like it to be so segregated that you have, but we can segregate wisely, like with cluster homes in certain areas where they're just small homes with people clustered around a little bit of green space. I know that's in one of the examples that we're going to be looking at for this, which is a great example. And then just well-designed roads. So not every road is used, so a driver can cut through to get someplace else a little quicker, because they either, in my instance, the people want to avoid the light, so they cut through where I live. As far it's not safe. I know that there's been issues talking about street safety, and to see little kids get all afraid because somebody is gunning down the road so quickly. It's, I just think that we could do better. So that's my intake.
Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah. Could I just request that we've heard a lot of really interesting stuff, and I would love nothing better than just kind of look down the list of what everybody said and try and find similarities, at some point after this meeting's over. Can I just request that we get all of these wishes in the minutes so we can see them all written down?
Sure, we do it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I took notes too, so I'll be able to check the minutes.
I would have been a little more clear if I would have known that was going to happen.
It's okay.
The rough life of being a public official.
We're actually, a side note, we're actually experimenting with grabbing the closed captioning and be able to export closed captioning from
Hmm.
Facebook or from YouTube. And so we're doing some experiments here. So we may have a word for word verbatim of exactly what was said over the last five minutes here.
Uh-oh.
I will work on it. Yes.
Great.
Good idea, Joseph. Thank you for asking.
Can I ask a
Um,
question?
Commissioner Green.
When we discuss affordability for homes, what specifically do we mean by that?
Um,
Like, do we have like a price range? Like what, I'm just curious, because like affordability could be Section 8, affordability could be 200 to 300,000. It could be like, I'm just wondering where that lands, just so I have a better idea of what, you know what I
The-
mean?
First page of the recommendations from Eco Northwest, in the middle of the page, has some numbers about income levels and the monthly housing cost.
Right, but everyone's opinion kind of falls in line with what that is, not something outside the box. Okay, I
30%
just,
of your monthly income.
Right.
Or being spent on housing.
depending on your monthly income. Okay, I'm just curious where we're landing on that. Okay, thank you.
It's a percentage of income to housing cost.
Right,
Does anybody
okay,
remember what the
perfect.
median income is for our area?
80
81,
80 for a household, I think.
because in 2020, Benton County's MFI was 81.
So then we're looking at somewhere between about 30 up to 30% of that, 20 to 30% being spent on housing, less than 30%, right?
Right, yeah. Okay, cool. I just want to make sure I was understanding it all correctly, so thank you.
So just to do some napkin math real quick here, if you're spending 30% of $80,000, right, then you're spending what,
Don't quote
25?
me on that. That was from our old housing chapter.
It sounds like we're talking about a mortgage that works out to somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,500 a month, maybe $2,000 a month at the highest.
Yeah.
So how much money is that right now? I'll get a number in a second.
All right. So as far as our, completing our agenda tonight, we've talked about kind of the goals in the housing strategy. We've talked about the goals for Monroe. We took a very quick glance at goals for the various cities. And I'm not sure that we can make too much more progress. I guess I don't feel ready to make more progress until I get to sit down with those goals and everything you guys have said and just kind of think about what I would propose for our, 4 to 6 goals for our housing chapter. Does anybody have any other thoughts or opinions, including Mr. Workman and Councilor Causey? Where do we
I
go?
think it's a good stopping spot unless somebody has anything else to add to tonight, but we can get you minutes out fairly quick and try to cover the sections we did. I think comparing that to Monroe and Sherwood and North Plains and Redmond, and again, any others out there, it's a fairly easy Google search to, pick a city of your choice and look at their comp plan, and everybody has a chapter on housing. So
Yeah.
feel free to do a little bit more research, and then we'll come back here in a couple of weeks and take a look. If there's anything that you want to put into the packet, as in you want to share with everybody else and get a hard copy to them, if you want to get that to me, we're meeting on the 22nd. So if you can get that to me by like Tuesday, the 15th, 2 weeks from today. If you want to get me, just email it to me, and that way I can get a hard copy to everybody else. Anything you share with me, I can email to everybody, but to go a hard copy into the packet, if there's something specific you want to share, just make a note, get that to me by the 15th so I can get it into the packets.
And I'm wondering if it would be useful and appropriate if we individually come up with our 4, 5, or 6 goals and go ahead and email those in, and then they become part of the packet, and we can merge it with other people's ideas. Or if you don't want to do that, I think that's okay too. But I think the more that we just kind of launch out there and get something to discuss definitively, the quicker we make progress than if we just kind of very slowly work through it. Commissioner Yoder.
So just so to be clear, what are we doing with the Philomath housing strategy and all of its policies that we've been? I mean, I know I looked it over. I was prepared to discuss what it said. So it sounds like we're not going to do that. We're not going to. The Philomath housing strategy is not where we want to, is what we want to pursue.
Chris, go ahead.
So I guess my recommendation would be, think about what you mentioned as your top 2 or 3, or, what your 4, try to get as all encompassing as you can. What should the 4 policies be, or the 4 goals be that the city's going to have in their housing section? And then once you kind of have those 4 written out, okay, now let's go looking for examples of policies or goals that would fit that, right? So if one of your top ones, which we heard, was affordable housing, well, let's look at the housing strategy document. Let's look at Monroe. Let's look at Sherwood. Let's look at their sections on affordable housing and find sections that we like, and roll that stuff over to me. Send that. It's like, on affordable housing, I really like this section. I think it captures it best, right? So I don't think we're throwing this out, but we're going to use it as a reference as we're doing some of these other examples that we've looked at tonight.
Or we could pull wording specifically from that document and say that's our goal. I
Right.
mean, there's wording there that we can use 100%.
We're just not limiting it to this, Commissioner Yoder, if that helps.
And I think if there's something specifically you want to talk about in here that kind of sets the stage for what goals we would include and not include, I think we could certainly take a few minutes and talk about that.
This is just not going where we're just not covering what I thought we would be covering is all. I didn't really so much think we're going to either be taking our own perspectives from other cities that we just got shots of today. I thought we were going to be using Echo Northwest that we've actually paid a pretty penny for, and then to make changes there. But hey, I've been wrong before.
That is what we could do, but I think, as I proposed, I think some of the language isn't like Chris said earlier, some of the language isn't really worded to be a comprehensive plan chapter, so it would need to be changed. And then, as various people talk, there's some exceptions to the way this is presented and some glaring omissions for some people. So I guess I'd like to hear from Commissioner Green. She had her hand up, and then Councillor Causey.
Sorry, I have an assistant being very loud in the background. So I'm clear, I mean, I liked what we did before, where we sent you all of our ideas and you kind of put them up with what we were working on, what we liked, and went off of that on the last kind of homework project. Is that kind of what we're doing now? We'll just kind of send you over our goals, our ideas, and then you guys are going to kind of compile them together and then we'll discuss it? Or I just don't want to send too much information and then you guys are getting bombarded with emails and then we're still stuck with 75 pages of stuff to go through because we've added to it.
Yeah, again, I didn't overly script this. I want to see where the conversation went. And I kind of like the way that it's going, frankly. So if staff's going to be compiling things, if I'm going to be compiling things from you, I need it a little bit sooner than the 15th. But I hate to give you not as much time either. But if I had stuff by even Friday, week from Friday, the 11th, that gives me the first part of the week. I'll be spending I won't, I'll have other things. So yeah, if I get it by Friday, I can compile that and get it out to you, in the packet. I don't know that I can get it much earlier than that, but by that, Wednesday or Thursday before the meeting, I can get it out to you. So before I said the 15th, but I guess if we're going to compile that, which makes sense, then let's bump that date back to the 11th or forward to the 11th. that work for everybody? Does that seem to make sense?
Yeah.
So, but again, what's not going to be helpful is like, I want housing, right? What I'd really want to see is housing as a goal, like affordable housing as a goal. Here's the policy that I like, and here's where I got it from, right? Here's the language that I would prefer for affordable housing, right? And this is where I got it from would be even more helpful. And you don't have to word for word just say, I really like the language from Monroe, their policy, whatever, LU 5.1 through 5.6, right? So just reference it is fine. You don't need to type it all out. So, and then affordable housing is one. There's discussion earlier about environmentally sustainable livability, reference Monroe chapter 3. Just say that, right? That's one of my top ones. Chapter 3 of Monroe's would fit that, right? Or here's a couple tweaks I'd recommend. So again, we're not looking for exact word for word, but at least give me that. That way I can compile that. We can say, hey, 4 or 5 of you all said this. That was pretty common, and this was the preferred language. And that gives you something to work from.
Yeah. Councilor Cosby.
I just wanted to say I really like the direction you're going. It's fun and it's exciting and fun to listen to. And come on, Piggy, you can pivot with the best of them. I know that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is some of the most important stuff we've done. I've done since I've been on the planning commission. It's, nuts and bolts are important too, but this high level stuff is good. So I encourage that thinking out there. I'm looking forward to some of Joseph's comments. He's always got some stuff out there that's pushing the boundaries, and I think this is the right time to push. So let's see what we can do. Back to our overall agenda, if I could find it. Which I'm not finding it, but we must have a staff report. Is that where we're at? I'm not finding it.
Yes.
Yeah, just a staff update.
Great.
Okay, so just report there. Again, this is kind of carryover. Won't get into a lot of details being Pat says hi. He is still recovering. He's doing well. And he replied to me over the weekend, said he checked his emails and had 300 something emails, and some of those got forwarded on to me and others for other jurisdictions and stuff. So he's at least checking emails at this point, or at least did, which tells me he's maybe getting really, really bored being at home recovering. But in the meantime, Ruth and Ashley and I continue to hold down the fort. Some kind of smaller applications we've talked about that I've included that we're working through. I'm happy to answer any, don't necessarily want to reread anything, but I'm happy to answer any questions that any planning commissioners have on what's in the report or anything else I can answer. Anything you've heard that's going on that I can chat to.
I have a question about the Mill Pond Crossing public hearing at our next meeting. Is that going to start off with a big presentation from them about some of the more details about that? I got the flyer in the mail and it leads me to a lot of questions, and I'm just curious to know what that probably looks like.
Yeah, so the hearing will follow the typical process. So there'll be a staff report that'll come out. It's supposed to be out 10 days prior to the hearing, so we'll get that posted and that'll get emailed to everybody. So they'll have the staff report, but for the hearing itself, it'll be a presentation of the staff report, and then we'll have time given to the applicant to describe the project. And then we'll go through, proponents, opponents, neutral parties. The applicant will get an opportunity to rebut anything that's been stated, and then close the hearing and go into deliberations. So the staff report hopefully will provide a lot of insights on it. It's a major modification. So they have an approval for a subdivision. They're looking to change some of their request changes to some of those original approvals. So with the major modification, we're really only dealing with those changes that they're making. So the staff report won't specifically be looking at portions of the project that aren't being changed. We're just looking at portions of the project that are being asked for a modification, which is a fairly significant change. And so it's going to cover a lot of what was covered in the first application for the subdivision. But there is a slight distinction there between a subdivision application and a modification to a subdivision application, which is what this one's going to be. So that's not answering any specific questions, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions, but that's the process for that public hearing.
Peggy?
I've been to a few of the hearings as most of us have been. And I know that there is a distinct difference sometimes between, say, comes to mind the original Mill Pond application, of which the staff report took almost 2 hours.
Mhm.
And then the developer spoke a little bit after that. And then you had the Letman development where Letman did pretty much the vast majority of the talking. So will this be from the developer most of the talking, or the speaking will be from the developer about what they're doing? Or will it come from the vast majority will come from, well, you? staff?
So in the original application for Mill Pond, it was actually 5 separate applications. And so I had to go through each of those individually, which is why the staff report was as long as it was. It was pretty complicated. There was an annexation, there was a zone change, there was a master plan overlay, there was a subdivision. So there's quite a bit to that one. And each one of those in and of itself took some time. And then they were all contingent upon one another and combined. So that one did take a little bit more time. My goal is to try to keep my comments to the 15 or 20 minutes or so. And we would want to limit the applicant's time to about that same, 15 to 30 minutes, depending on what it is. The biggest part is we want to provide enough information that you can make an informed decision. But at the same time, there's an anticipation that you'll have read the staff report and be familiar with the project before the hearing starts as well.
Thank you.
My other question, total new dwelling units for the first 7 months is 5. Is that high, low, average?
It's low for the last, 4 or 5 years. It's kind of average for the last 20 years.
Okay, thank you.
So it's about what we'd anticipated. We don't really have any big undeveloped approved subdivisions out there other than the Mill Pond Crossing subdivision. And they're a little bit of a standstill as they're preparing for this next phase and the modification and whatnot. So there's a few smaller subdivisions out there that have been approved, but they're adding, 1 or 2 houses a year, kind of thing. So a little bit of infill. So yeah, it's a little slow, but yeah.
Okay. Thank
Summer's
you.
coming. I anticipate we'll have a few more applications in the summer.
Yeah. Gianna, did you raise your hand? Yeah, go ahead.
Question about the new lots available at the mobile home park. 55 new lots, that's a significant increase. Is it possible to get a map of where those will be relative to what is currently there?
Yeah, I believe the active planning file is still on the website. I can send you a link to that. That'd be helpful.
Thank you.
They're mostly on the 19th Street is here. And then to the west of that is where the mobile home park is. And then there's a creek. They're doing 2 bridges to cross that creek. And then the other 55 units will be west of the existing development. So they're going west if you look at the map, but I can provide you that link.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Look forward to our next discussion. And it could be a significantly longer meeting because of the Mill Pond Plus.
Yeah, we're really gonna try, just timing wise, we're gonna try to keep the hearing to that hour and a half maybe, and then try to pull, and then from there transition to the housing discussion. And again, try to limit that. We can pick it back up in March. With the direction we're headed, I don't think we're looking at a hearing in March. You know, if everybody liked what Eco Northwest had pulled together and it was just a few tweaks, we might have been ready by then, but that's clearly not the direction we're headed, which is fine. So we won't be holding a housing hearing on that first meeting in March. We'll take our time and make sure that it's something that everybody likes and go from there. So don't worry too much about the hearing dates. Staff will kind of keep an eye on that. And when it looks like we're maybe a couple meetings out, our biggest thing with that hearing is we have to notify DLCD, Department of Land Conservation Development, 35 days prior to that hearing. So if we wait till it's done and then we notify them, now we're another whole month out before we can have the meeting. So we have to shoot from the hip a little bit on that date and then adjust it as needed. Okay, that's all I've got. Thanks, everybody.
Our next meeting is February 22nd. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, guys.